Hi everybody, this is Dr. Alexander, and I am going to be talking with you today about budgeting for residency-associated expenses. This is, I think, one of the things that's maybe looked at least, and it's probably one of the most important topics, secondary to which programs you're actually going to apply to, because in order to successfully apply, you need to be able to finance your search. And if you look in a lot of the residency manuals, a lot of the residency books, they hint at budgeting, but they really don't describe how to do it or what costs you might be looking at. So this is going to be my sort of approach to budgeting. I will tell you that money management is not always a strong suit of mine, but I am very detail oriented and I am a list maker and like to kind of keep things in order. So I guess that's the expertise that I bring about budgeting, and just having been through it, I know kind of the costs and the ins and outs. Please keep in mind that from year to year the numbers may change. So these are numbers from most recent years and most recent information that I could find and somewhat approximations. So your budget may fluctuate depending on various factors related to your residency search. Okay, let's talk through some of the costs that you might be looking at when pursuing a residency. From the get-go, the first one you're probably going to be looking at is the cost to register for the match. It's a one-time fee, and you get a number associated with you as an individual that then helps when you're applying to actually pair you up with programs in the process known as the match. You have to submit for matching registration prior or at the same time as signing up for Forecast, and the cost is $150. Forecast is the online platform that's used for submitting most applications to residency programs. There are some that still use methods outside of Forecast, but this is the central one that most programs will utilize. And honestly, it's so much easier now to go through Forecast and have that centralized submission platform. Back in the dark ages when I was looking at residency programs, we would have to mail everything out. It was at the same time as a lot of Christmas packages were going out, and you just kind of hope and prayed that your things would get there on time and wouldn't get lost in the mail. And then secondly, you spent a lot of money because those application packets were really heavy, right? You had your transcripts, you had all your letters, you had all your other documents, and it was just sort of a nightmare to make sure you had everything uploaded and typed and packaged just so, an address to make sure it went to the right program. Forecast has made that significantly easy. So you can upload transcripts. It's a one-time fee. Everything is sort of dumbed down and is a lot more easy and convenient. So what are the fees for Forecast? It's $100 when you apply, and that gets you the ability to apply to 4 different sites. Now, most people who search for residency programs will have a varying degree in how many programs they actually apply to. And if you choose to apply to more than 4, it's $40 a pop after those initial 4. So this may be an area where you really have to hone in on which programs are the most essential or the most applicable to what you're looking for, because you are going to incur cost for each site you apply to. When you upload your application, you do have to have transcripts. I don't believe ETSU charges you to get transcripts printed. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure we do not charge. But there may be a nominal cost to getting that done. Okay, so that's the process for actually going through the electronic application submission. What about the search for residency programs? Most students and residency-bound candidates will go to the largest gathering of residency programs, which is at the ASHP mid-year meeting and residency showcase. So you're going to have to figure around $300 for the cost of attendance of that meeting, and then travel and lodging, and that may vary based on membership in student organizations. So it might really be beneficial to join SSHP in your third or fourth year to ensure that you get discounted registration rates for that meeting, and then also assistance from the chapter for travel if possible. And depending on where the location is for that meeting, your travel and lodging may differ. There are only 4 locations that host mid-year: Orlando, New Orleans, Las Vegas, and Anaheim. So especially when it's on the West Coast, travel can become a problem. And I'll talk about other tips to sort of minimize your travel. So that's what you can go, opportunities to go and shop around for programs. I didn't include it here, but there may be more local residency showcases that may also be cost, although it would probably be a lot more minimal. Currently, Tennessee does host an in-state residency showcase for all the Tennessee residency programs, and that's held in October in Nashville. Again, that would be a much lower cost than the ASHP mid-year meeting. And other states host similar programs. So if you're looking at programs in Ohio, say, I know Ohio has a residency showcase, North Carolina does as well, and I'm sure there are others. Okay, let's fast forward. You've looked at residency programs, you've applied through the match, now you're getting offers to interview. Depending on how many programs you apply to and where they're located, you're going to have various costs associated with travel and lodging to those interviews. None of that is paid for by the potential site, it's all by the candidate, and typically those are one-day interviews. So, you're probably going to be having a day of travel potentially the day before, and I would say if they're anywhere remote from home, probably at least one day, one night in a hotel, if not more. Other interview costs would be relatively minimal, and that might be, getting a new suit, getting some business cards, getting a portfolio. But generally, the travel is really where you incur the most cost. Then, once you successfully match and you are on your way to your new residency program, you also have to keep in mind, I think, the end, which is after graduation, you have to sit for those boards, and they are expensive. So when you're thinking about licensure, it's roughly $1,000 per state where you apply for licensure, just as a general rule. So state fees, you're typically going to have an application fee and a background check fee. And in the state of Tennessee, that sums up to nearly $300. Then you're going to have fees for your board tests. And this is going to vary depending on whether or not your state that you're seeking licensure in uses the MPJE for their law boards. States that do not use the MPJE typically have a little lower cost. But your NAPLEX is right around $500, and then the MPJE is around $200. So that will bring you to roughly $700 just in board exams. And then if you're looking at multi-state licensure, you're going to go up from there. I would say licensure is one of those things that a lot of people forget about, and it's something that's really necessary when you're making your budget. I haven't included any links to budgets here. Dave Ramsey has budgets that you can view online. I Googled residency search budgets and really didn't come up with anything specific for residency searches, but there are plenty of budget templates. There are budget templates in Excel and in Word. So if you find a budget template, just make sure to consider all of these different items and potentially some that are unique to you when calculating up that budget. There may also be some extras that you want to consider. Graduation is in May. Residencies don't start till July. And so when we're talking about residency-bound candidates, something that sometimes gets lost is, well, what about all the things that happen between when I get that residency position and the start of my actual residency? There's some costs that you need to budget for kind of in the middle. Graduation costs here at ETSU, I would say roughly $40 to $50 for robe rental. I'm not sure as far as announcements and graduation pictures, what the costs are there. Probably varies depending on what you're looking at. You know, some people are going to have moving costs if they're relocating, especially, anywhere distant from Johnson City. You may have deposits or down payments that you have to put down on new housing. And then I have at the bottom personal upkeep costs. You might want to get a good haircut before your first day of residency. You might want to buy some new clothes because you're going to be maybe in a little bit more of a dressier environment. You might want to get some really comfortable shoes because you're going to be standing a lot. All those kind of personal upkeep things, a new computer, a new tablet, maybe a new briefcase, all of those things that, maybe weren't so important to you before, that you might not have. Now, don't go hog wild in that personal upkeep cost line. It's really important to stay on a budget because we know residency salaries are fairly low. So really spend within your means. I think that's important. I wanted to wrap up with some tips. So this kind of relates to those personal upkeep costs. Be a savvy shopper. And this can relate to personal upkeep things. It can relate to travel and lodging. So figure out when the cheapest day for airfare is. You may not be able to book super far in advance, especially if you don't know which interview days are available or which programs you're actually going to be interviewing at. But typically, when I say it's Tuesday or Wednesday, are when airfare costs are at their lowest. Use those bargain hunting websites, find good deals on housing. It doesn't have to be, the nicest place. It just has to be somewhere safe and close to your interview, because you really want to try to make sure that you're saving things. Second, make sure to budget for this, and really you should start budgeting, I would say, almost in your third year of pharmacy school. Start setting money aside. Please, please, please don't borrow extra if you can help it for your residency search. Why do I say that? Well, when you start a residency, you don't have to pay on your loans. You can go into something called forbearance, which is where your base payment is held off for an additional year or two, depending on how long of residency or how long you're in residency. However, you continue to accrue interest, and that interest compounds very quickly. So the more you borrow, the higher your interest is going to be, and ultimately the higher your monthly payments, the longer you're going to be paying on those loans. So if you can carve out money out of your existing loans and store that away and create a budget for yourself, or work, find other ways to generate revenue and income and set that aside, it's really going to benefit you in the long run to not have to borrow more money for that residency search. So try to keep things as low cost as possible. You don't need a new suit for every interview. You're not going to see the same people. Frankly, as long as it's a nice suit, people, even if you did see the same people, are probably not going to notice. So find something that's utilitarian, that you can wear multiple shirts underneath. You can sort of adjust with jewelry for ladies. Find something that fits really well and just go with the one as opposed to maybe multiples. Find ways to keep your budget tight. The third one here, fail to plan, plan to fail. Blah, 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 blah. Tongue twister. Fail to plan, plan to fail. If you don't plan, you're probably going to run out of finances. So it's really important to start saving now so that later on you're able to make a really good budget based off of the places you're applying, so that you don't have issues with money. If you can have some sort of savings even in the back, that would be great. So if you have the money set aside for your residency search, and then kind of a slush fund that you only have to tap into as needed, that would be sort of the ultimate thing. Maybe airfare's a little more expensive than you thought. Maybe it's a especially busy travel day that you need to go for your interview. Having a little bit of buffer can really be helpful. And then lastly, find an in case of emergency. So what's your solution if any sort of random scenario happens? What's your plan if you don't match in the phase 1 match? What if you have to go on to phase 2 if you choose to? Well, those are additional costs that maybe you didn't originally budget for. So what's your in case of emergency there? Is it using a credit card? Do you have a friend or a family member who's able to help you finance your residency search? What it comes down to is this is your future, this is your career, and you want to make good, educated choices about where you're applying and how you're spending your money, but you don't want to be limited by the fact that your finances are coming short. So if you budget and you plan and you save, that's going to help ensure your success, and it's not going to feel restrictive. And then if everything falls apart, make sure to have that conversation ahead of time with someone about, well, what do we do if this happens? How does this play into our overall plan? As someone who went through the scramble, at the time, now phase 2 match, there were some costs that I hadn't originally planned for. Luckily, I was able to keep my search fairly local, so I didn't have to fly anywhere. I didn't have to have overnight lodging. I just had to drive to most interviews. So that was lucky, but you never know what's going to happen, and make sure to sort of have that thought out ahead of time. So those are my tips for budgeting for residency search. Let's flip back to the chart. So make sure to think of before, during, and after. I guess that's a good way to think of it. Before, you're thinking about the actual application process itself. The during would be the travel, and then the after would be the licensure and some of those in between times once you've secured a residency. Important to still consider that. I wish you the best of luck in your residency search. Residency does great things, and it was one of the best choices I ever made. It is a commitment. It's completely worth it. Best of luck, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.